Today, lovely to speak to you. Thanks for being here with us today. Really glad to have you on the show. Yeah, by way of introduction, today you are a very experienced AI and machine learning leader. You've had experience working in a lot of the big tech organizations as well as some AI startups as well. You have written a book most recently around natural language processing. So really interested to hear a bit more about that. And I know from our first conversation, you've worked across multiple disciplines within the world of software engineering and AI, and as such work with a lot of different technologies as well. So it'll be a real treat today to pick your brains and hear more about your journey through tech and into leadership. So if we could be so kind, if you could start by giving us just a little bit of an overview of your background and your career to date, that would be fantastic.
Yeah. Hey, well, first I'd like to say thanks for the invite. It's definitely a treat from my end to be able to have this chat, to be invited to this podcast. So thanks so much for the opportunity to speak here. Yeah, I think maybe a good place to start is to do a very quick introduction to kind of to go very quickly through what we'll be covering today, and in doing so, maybe I'll be able to guide everyone through a little bit of through the kind of my career in general, the technical experience, background, and go through maybe a little bit about the right choices I made, in my career, and even more so, I think, about all the mistakes that I've made as well. And I'm very happy to share those, and maybe someone can learn something from that also. Maybe an interesting place where my kind of career started, and it wasn't really a conscious decision at the time. It was just an interest at the time, but it started very early. I started as a kid. I was around 13, and I was very lucky to be able to start in an era where internet was already relatively widely available. That was probably in 2001. Oh no, 2000 and must have been 2003. Yeah. Was around the time when I started programming, and I just experimented a little bit. I started developing websites. It was the first, PHP was the first language I started with, and then got into high school, and then I also met some friends with whom we kind of programmed together. We worked on different projects, and then one day a schoolmate of mine reached out to me and said, "Hey, this media company in Slovenia, it's the biggest media company we have in the country. It's a privately owned media company. I don't know what the equivalent in the UK would be. Maybe not the Guardian, but something similar, I would say. Basically,
or what kind of media are we talking? Is it press?
Press, yeah, but they kind of have the most traffic in terms of their online website. So at least at the time, their website was the thing.
Companies like Reach that are pretty big in the UK.
Yeah. They have a whole portfolio of different brands, right? Yeah. I think that would be a good equivalent. So yeah, so my schoolmate reached out to me. There was this ad. They were hiring students, and in Slovenia, when you're 15, you can start working a student job. And he reached out to me and said, "Hey, there's this interesting job, and maybe we could consider applying." Then we kind of slept over it, and I applied over the weekend. We got back to school, and I asked, like, "Did you apply as well?" And he was like, "Nah, there's no way they're gonna hire us. Like, just not gonna work." And then a few days later, I got an invite to the interview, and the funny story was that because I was so early in this field in my career, I was kind of forgiven to fail completely. So the first interview I had, like, I wasn't able to really answer any of the questions in a way that was in which it was intended. Maybe there were a few like minor things that they liked, or maybe the mindset was something that they liked, but I feel like the main kind of decision-making process on why they hired me was because I was ambitious and young, and because of that, I was really had this advantage of being able to be completely inexperienced and completely wrong on most of the interview questions I had at the time, and that gave me the opportunity to get into real software development team, where I got to learn, how how the software development process looks like, how code review looks like. And basically, when you're serving a website for, I don't know how many daily users we had, but if every second person in the country visited every day, that would be around 1 million visits per day. So it was quite an experience at the time. So it allowed me to also kind of fail, essentially, because again, the expectations were not very high. I would say, like, if someone hires a 15-year-old, I think what they're looking for is either investing in someone who will at some point in the future become I would say a productive employee, or they want to come up with maybe good ideas or bring fresh ideas or fresh approaches to the company. But kind of the net gain in the beginning of what I delivered was not more than I was paid. I don't think so. But yeah, I feel like that was the expectation as well. And as a result, I learned a lot. That was quite fun.
Nice. There's a nice story there. I think, is it Michael Jordan says you miss 100% of the shots that you never take.
Yeah. That's it's a good saying. Yeah. And that kind of gave me, again, in the same way I had kind of a head start, because I started, experimenting with software engineering as a 13-year-old. At 15, I already had some, experience working. And again, I had some head start, so that when I was in Slovenia, when I finished high school, I have this long, almost 4-month-long holiday before you go to uni. And I took advantage of that, and I started working for a UK, again, a media company, but it was, again, a website in Leeds. And it wasn't really in Leeds, it was outside of Leeds, in very remote village called Berlin-Wolfdale.
I actually know that, weirdly. I've got a mate,
Cool.
really good mate from uni, who lives in Berlin-Wolfdale, and I'd never heard of it until I went to the local pub over there. So that's quite a surprise, actually.
Interesting. Interesting. Yeah, they had a Queen's Head. I think that was the pub.
It's probably where I went, to be honest.
that is a coincidence. Yeah. Yeah, and it was I don't know, my vision for moving to the UK was like I'd be part of a big city and kind of a corporate lifestyle, and I ended up somewhere in a village with like sheep farms and
Yeah, that's about as remote as it gets, isn't it, Berlin-Wolfdale?
I think so. Yeah, yeah. But it was a wonderful experience. I kind of look back at it with fond memories, for sure. I had an opportunity to work on something concrete, something real. We had a project where we were moving a website, again, that had quite a lot of daily visitors. We were moving it from a legacy system to a PHP website. And I had an opportunity to work on that for initially 4 months, and then I was offered a full-time role, but that would mean I wouldn't be able to get to uni. So I decided to go back to Slovenia and kind of work for this company remotely. And that allowed me to kind of work for them on and off for a few years and on a few different projects until I finished my studies. Yeah, again, this kind of, it wasn't really the expertise or talent or anything like that. But again, I had this head start, and it allowed me to move to the next step in my career and get like a proper full-time job. And I was able to secure a job in London even before I graduated. So I had a job waiting for me, essentially, like waiting for the day I defend my master's thesis. So I think I defended it on a Friday, and then on Tuesday I started work in London.
Oh, wow,
I had
fantastic.
had to relocate before that. And that's where kind of my journey from, let's say, websites kind of moved more towards, data science and machine learning oriented work as well. So I worked for that small startup for a while, and then I moved to a completely machine learning role, which was a lead machine learning role at a company called Open Capacity. And the reason I kind of mentioned that role specifically was it was my first kind of lead role. It was interesting from that perspective, but it was also I would say one of the most interesting opportunities I had to contribute to the field of AI and machine learning in my career, because of kind of the flexibility and kind of freedom we all had in kind of choosing either the technologies or the approaches, or pretty much doing whatever works to kind of achieve the goal, the end goal. So I had some super interesting projects at that company. Maybe one I can mention specifically was the kind of the pilot project we started with a transport company in London. It's not hard to guess which one, but essentially it involved tracking the capacity of buses on public transport. So essentially involved like a computer vision system, tracks cameras, and kind of counts how many different individuals are on the bus at a certain point. So it was like it was a real world challenge, because we had to train a model, deploy to an actual device, to an actual vehicle, and then test it out in the real world. And then we came up with all those real world issues where, for example, there were some buses where people were just completely were wearing not face masks, but they had their heads covered, and the computer vision models didn't work with that.
Yeah.
For example, very often it would see someone from outside the bus. Someone was standing on the outside of the bus, but you could see them through the window, and then the computer vision obviously assumed that it was a person inside. There were cameras that were kind of overlapping as well, so it was one person, but it was visible on two cameras. So we had to solve that problem as well.
I bet. Yeah. Well, yeah. Computer vision, I find, is a really interesting field of machine learning, and like I say, it's really often when you're using computer vision, it's for a real life problem, and you're actually, like I say, training a model, and you're kind of seeing it through to the real world, and you're seeing the kind of impact it has. But like I say, there's so many different, even just in that kind of context there's so many different parameters to take into account, aren't there, and different things you have to allow for that. It's a very interesting field.
Yeah. I agree with that, and I feel like this kind of still stands today. You could argue the same for example, for natural language processing. Before we got transformer models, before everything became completely commercialized, I don't think that's the case for NLP, for example. Today, like, the answer for 98% of use cases in NLP is just, let's use a commercial solution like ChatGPT, and maybe let's fine tune it, or do RAG or whatever we can do on top. But we use a baseline that's basically a commercial product. There's very little point in training something new from scratch, at least for small companies. For computer vision, problems are very much, I would say, down to earth to an extent where, or I would say maybe sometimes they're just so niche and specific that these type of foundation models still can't perform as well, or there's just no point in using a huge transformer model. You can train something on your laptop, deploy it, and it's going to work equally as well. It's very hard to do the same in NLP these days.
Yeah, true. Yeah, absolutely. Sorry, I interrupted your story when you were talking about your career.
Yeah, no, not at all, not at all. That was and the role. Yeah, I was talking about my opportunity to work at Open Capacity on those interesting projects, and I still kind of look back at that with truly fond memories, because because the culture of the company and kind of the opportunities we had were just I would say outstanding, and kind of I didn't appreciate it as much. I would say enough when I had the opportunity to, now when I look back at it. And the next step in my career then involved starting a role at Microsoft, and I specifically worked on two different teams, but they were both focused on kind of improving either the quality or the language models themselves of a Microsoft product called SwiftKey. So this is a phone app essentially that allows you to type with autocorrect essentially. So it provides auto suggestions, next word suggestions, and these days it also involves a lot of other features such as ChatGPT and so on. And that involved 4+ years. It was less than 5 years at Microsoft, and I was able to kind of get the experience of working, in a corporation as well. It's something that if someone gets an opportunity to go through, I would definitely encourage it. I wouldn't really recommend, tailoring all your career choices so that you would land a job in a big tech company. But if you get an opportunity, it's definitely something worth pursuing. And that kind of allowed me to build, I would say, enough engineering experience and excellence so that I kind of grew as an engineer as well. There was a stage where I also kind of decided to maybe make a change. It was part of the change was to have to do with career, but it was also related to the fact that I moved from London to Slovenia. So for a short period of time, I worked. I was officially employed in the Slovene Microsoft division, which is mostly just sales these days, and I was reporting to London. But I was kind of a fully remote worker. There wasn't much interest in investing in me traveling or anything that would help me connect with the team. So I was kind of I missed that. So my next career step involved this, the current role where I currently work as an associate director in this pharma company that has a very strong presence in Slovenia. So unlike Microsoft, where there's only a few salespeople, in Slovenia, this pharma company, there's a significant part of, I would say, I think the company involves like 2 or a few percent of GDP of the entire company. So sorry, of the entire country.
Wow.
So it's it plays an important role in the local sphere, I would say, as well, and it also plays an important role in the corporation as well. So it's not just like some small remote division, but it's one of the core components of the corporation as well. That's something I missed at Microsoft, and that I do have now, and I do appreciate that.
Perfect. What are sort of key learns that you've taken from moving into leadership, I suppose, and how do you feel you've had to adapt your approach, and what skills do you feel you've had to learn to become a good AI and ML leader?
I feel like I'd say like most of the skills really to get there, I've kind of learned by observing the system that works really well, mostly like at my previous role. I think given the size of the company, it's I find it more and more impressive to see like how well everything works, especially when you go from a company that was as huge as MS to something smaller. And I feel like I had an opportunity to kind of just be a silent observer in my previous role and kind of learn these types of things. And maybe to do an overview of like things that I personally think are important for lead role in AI and ML. I feel like you need to be you need to have a well-rounded kind of set of traits that involve a few different things. And the first thing I think that's really important, especially in a fast-changing field like AI, is to have something that is a buzzword from corporate, but I feel like it's very important is to have a growth mindset, which essentially it means that you kind of have some, an ability to be humble and to kind of accept the fact that there's many things that you don't know, or that there's many things that are just occurring and changing all the time, and to be kind of content with that, but not to allow that to kind of to lose confidence because of that, but to allow this to kind of motivate you to kind of learn new things, and just be aware of things, aware of like what are not your strengths. And maybe when you're doing hiring, it's very important to be aware of what your strengths are and what your strengths aren't, and be aware of the kind of the bias that's usually common with like young managers, which is that basically when you're putting the job descriptions, you would always put the things in the job requirements that you are good at, as an engineer. And by doing so, you introduce a bias that would result in only people that are able to showcase the same type of knowledge would get hired, because the people who have strengths elsewhere will not have an opportunity to show that as part of the interview process. And in doing so, you would then hire pretty much the individuals that are they have exactly the same knowledge and skills as you have. And as a young manager, you kind of need to do the exact opposite, right? You need to hire people who have who are kind of complement your strengths and not just be a duplicate of your own self. So yeah, having a growth mindset basically allows you to kind of be humble, appreciate the things that you don't know, but also to embrace change, essentially. To kind of, you need to be aware of the fact that everything that you've learned and everything that you know by now, it kind of depreciates in value every day. And in the field that we work in today, in AI and ML, this is even more so important, I would say. There are some fields where you kind of go to uni, graduate, and you can kind of milk that same cow until until you retire, and maybe you won't be like you won't make headlines, but you can have a decent career by taking on this approach. If you take the same approach with AI, you go to uni, you learn a little bit about AI, and then you use these same skills. Maybe you'll survive for 2, 3, 4, 5 years, and that's pretty much it. And then you'll need to say goodbye.
Yeah, that's a really good point, actually, and obviously it stands to reason that the AI world is a rapidly evolving world, and I'm sure everybody knows that. But I've never actually thought of it that way in terms of the way you've articulated it. And I guess there is a real need, and I suppose bit of a pressure, isn't there, on people in that industry to make sure they are constantly staying up to date and being relevant, with their skills to keep themselves sort of future-proofed and employable.
Yeah, I think so. There definitely can this change can reflect in feeling like it's pressure, especially if you don't embrace this type of a growth mindset. So if you're not kind of honest about what you don't know, if you're not honest about what your weaknesses are, then you're kind of you work under the expectation that you kind of are a complete expert in everything, and it becomes increasingly hard to kind of build this facade. Whereas if you kind of just embrace the things you don't know and you're very open about it, this change is a lot easier, right? So you can approach new things with curiosity and without any fear of just being open about the fact that you have no clue about that, but you have an open mindset and you're gonna learn something new. So
yeah, fair enough. And talking of a growth mindset, I guess probably good time to talk about one of the things I'm sure you're very proud of, and it's one of those things that I think everybody should give a go at some point in their life. But obviously you decided to write a book quite recently. So talk us through that whole experience and what inspired you to go there.
The experience of writing a book is I'd say it's an interesting story. I don't think it's a typical success story in any way, but I'm very happy that I went through it. Nevertheless, the way I started with the idea kind of sprung from the fact that someone from the publisher, I published a book under a publisher called Pact, and I think they're one of the biggest publishers by volume. So they publish, I think, if not the most, they're one of the companies that publish almost amongst the top companies that publish the most books in terms of numbers. In terms of sales, I think they're not the top, but very close as well. So it's I would say a publisher with increasingly decent reputation. And I was it seemed like one of the employees from the company reached out to me based on the fact that I wrote a few blog posts. So I've been writing blog posts for a few years. So essentially, during the weekends, I was experimented with new technologies, and whenever I learned something interesting or whenever I solved a problem that I didn't find an immediate answer for on the web, I figured, why not write a blog post about it? And one of the results of that was that someone from that publishing company reached out to me, saw the blog post, and then reached out to me and said, "Hey, do you wanna write a book about this particular technology that you wrote about. So I wrote a blog post about a natural language processing library called Flare. It's a Python package that mostly focuses on tagging, and specifically like on things like named entity recognition. And I was kind of considered the offer, and I kind of in the end I accepted it, and I kind of accepted it based on the fact that based on my assumption that they kind of did all the research about the potential market, right? Because it's a very niche topic, right? Because you have the field of AI, and then within the field of AI you've got natural language processing. Within natural language processing you have sequence tagging, and within sequence tagging you've got named entity recognition, and within named entity recognition there's Python packages, and then there's several packages that do that, and one of those is Flare. And that's what I wrote the book about. So it's extremely niche, it's extremely specific, and as a result, the target audience is very small. So I kind of I expected that, even though I kind of hoped that the publisher had made all the prior research in making sure that maybe it's not as niche as we thought. Turns out it is very niche. So I sell like a couple of books a month. It's been like that so far. So it's not like any huge commercial success, but I feel like that people who are interested in this very specific niche topic have found it interesting so far. So
yeah, absolutely. And even sell a couple of copies a month, right? I mean, there's still people out there that are still solving a problem for people. That they're obviously they've got this issue, and you've got the right resource to help them do it. And I suspect just going through that whole process of writing a book, even though obviously that's quite a niche, subset of machine learning, and in particular NLP, I can imagine that whole process was very rewarding and probably very educational. And who's not to say that you can now go and write another book in a different field, and sort of translate that into the next book. So what did you sort of take from the journey of actually setting about the process of writing a book?
Well, I would say like the process of writing a book kind of depends a lot on the kind of field in which you're specializing, or the type of content you're writing. If you're writing, let's say, fiction, for example, there's probably a lot less time pressure because the topic is it doesn't become obsolete with time, right? So it's as relevant 1 year or compared to 2 years later, for example.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, with technology, it's not the same, right? So if you have a full-time job, the way the entire arrangement works usually, if you're a high-profile writer, you can get around that. But usually, the usual process is essentially you get in contact with the employees at the publishing company and the editors and everyone, and you kind of come up with a rough table of content. So you kind of define all the chapters, and then you kind of set a deadline for each chapter, essentially. So in advance, you kind of commit to writing something, and the deadlines are quite like, when you split it into all those different chapters, you realize you actually need to write quite a lot. So I think what it ended up being was I had to write like 20 pages a week or something like that. And it's, if you're writing about something that you did yourself, or something generic, it's easy. But if you're writing a technical book that sometimes involves certain concepts that you haven't really mastered, right? Because I was competent in using Flare as a user of a Python package, but now as a book writer, I was in a completely different position. I had to explain the inner workings and all the logic and how it was implemented. So yeah, that was quite an experience. So I ended up being a little late on delivering it, but it wasn't a big deal. So the publishing company, it was a great experience from their end. And then of course they provide with all the proofreading resources, and you pretty much have all the support you need. They designed the front cover and everything. maybe the only mistake I've kind of made in the process, and something I would like to repeat on if I were to write another book, would be to kind of involve a few other experts to cover some very specific things. So there were some super specific technologies involved in the Flare framework that, you know, I would just need to spend, you know, weeks and weeks researching to be able to understand them well enough to actually write a good chapter about it in the book. Because in the chapter you need to write it on different levels of complexity. You need to write a nice introduction. You need to break it down and understand it really to its lowest possible form. And there were some topics that I just didn't do that, and I just pretty much kind of you kind of reword just the wording that's used in like the official publication, for example.
Yeah.
But you don't really add any value by doing that.
Mm.
And you don't allow others to learn anything more than if they actually refer to the original paper, for example. So yeah, next time I'd like to, you know, give just maybe even for like small parts of the book, but to involve other experts and allow them to contribute to that. I think that would be the right thing to do.
Yeah, that's a really really good point. And I think, but you know, even just hearing you say that now, it's the fact you've done it, and it's been a learning exercise, and like you say, you can build that in now into the next project. And I think everybody probably thinks as soon as they write a book, you know, it's going to become the bestseller. Well, not that many people do ever get around to writing a book, but like you say, just in the nature of going through it, it's very educational, and you then learn a lot that you could, you know, what worked, what didn't work, and that kind of thing. But I think it's a really interesting point you make about the actual nature of the book itself, and what it is. Like I say, the difference between fiction and non-fiction, and how those two different approaches will vary. Yeah, I never really thought about it like that. But yeah, it's a very good point. Cool. Let's talk a little bit about I suppose your skills and experience, and the sort of characteristics and traits that you've picked up working in these different types of environments. Like I said, you've obviously worked in a startup organization, you've worked in a bigger organization like Microsoft. What do you feel each experience sort of taught you, and what's it sort of meant for you in terms of your growth and development as an AI and ML leader?
Yeah, I've actually indeed was kind of lucky to have this experience working both in small startups, maybe some very legacy-minded, you know, media companies, and then big tech as well, and now a pharma corporation also. And I think that the important thing is to kind of to be aware of what a certain, you know, job or career opportunity, to be aware of what it offers and what its benefits are, and to kind of embrace that. And obviously you need to have the knowledge of like what those benefits and opportunities really are. Without that knowledge, it's hard to embrace it. But now that I do have this knowledge of what kind of things that are worth appreciating were at my previous roles, you know, I can kind of point them out more easily now with this knowledge. So, for example, when I worked at Open Capacity as the lead ML engineer, but there were only, you know, a couple of employees. It was a small company. You know, what I didn't appreciate at the time was really this kind of freedom that I had in being able to experiment with new approaches, new technologies, basically just to have an opportunity to do whatever works with very little limitations. You know, there were legal and ethical limitations, obviously. You don't want it to sound like we were bypassing that, but beyond that, really there were no limits. And that's it's an amazing opportunity to be able to do that. So if you're if you're in tech, if you're, you know, hyped about tech, interested about tech, you know, you can spend the weekend about experimenting with something. Monday morning you can write a prototype, you know, on Tuesday you can ship it, right? And there's very little things in the way of you being able to do that. On the other hand, in a corporation, maybe as an individual contributor, you can get away with like creating a proof of concept, but as a lead, if you want to bring a certain tool or a concept or a new platform to the corporation, you need to go through alignment with so many different departments, the legal department, the privacy department, the infrastructure department, and that alignment will just take you, months, and very often, more often than not, the decision about whether you're going to be successful in delivering something new is not really even technical, or has very little to do with how good the idea is. It has more to do with like how well you'll be able to help those types of departments, or able to help them position politically and so on. So yeah, there's a lot more. It's a lot harder to bring in new technologies, new ideas in a corporate environment, and that's something I didn't appreciate working in a startup. But something I didn't have in a startup, of course, is being surrounded by so many skilled individuals. And that's something that I was able to really, to the full extent leverage at Microsoft. I had I don't think like saying I was lucky would mean that it doesn't happen very often, but in general, I think it does at Microsoft. Like most individuals are come from a background where you do need to display a certain level of technical excellence, and if you're surrounded with so many such individuals in an environment that kind of encourages knowledge sharing and mentoring and so on, you truly are able to kind of grow and take all this knowledge in like a sponge in a way, and that's something I truly do appreciate working at MS specifically. I think the kind of the growth culture and learning culture is a very important part of the company, of the company culture itself. And I think it's a brilliant idea. Obviously, if you look at how well the company is doing, it's probably one of the right steps that the company made that allowed them to get to where they currently are.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's clearly evident from hearing you speak there. There's a realization. There's clearly a lot of pros to both. And obviously, I say a lot of potential cons and frustrations at the same time, but in the same breath, it's often the way, isn't it, in life, that you don't realize what it was like until you get that kind of external verification from another experience, or from working in another company, to make you appreciate potentially what it was like working somewhere else. And like you say, I always say to candidates, when they're moving jobs, it's a new chapter, using the book reference. It's a new chapter in your story, and it will be a different story to the last chapter. But when you go through each chapter, it kind of helps put into context what the previous chapter was about and what you've learned from that. And you've got to sort of see it as an ever evolving story, I suppose, and take different skills and experiences from each chapter.
Yeah. I guess the trick is realizing what you should embrace before the next chapter comes.
Yeah.
And
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, which I guess is you kind of get a little, probably as you get a little bit more mature and you get a little bit more older, and you kind of try and maybe recognize those things a little bit sooner, and become a little bit more wise and philosophical, shall we say.
I hope so.
Yeah. We all try. Okay, cool. Let's obviously, you mentioned earlier, and like you say, with writing your book, I mean, the world of AI and machine learning is just an ever evolving landscape, and evolving at such a unbelievable. I mean, I've been in tech recruitment for 16 years now, and I look at where we are today in terms of the world of technology, compared to where we were when I first started, and it's just a totally different world. And I know a lot of that change has happened really quite exponentially at sort of lightning speed within the last few years. But if we were to kind of move that forward, what are you most excited about in the world of machine learning and AI, moving forward? Is there anything that stands out to you?
Yeah. So I think it's not going to be a surprising answer, but I think it was like the thing that excites or surprised us, everyone that worked in machine learning the most, was the emergence of transformer models, and how they're able to simulate or get close to kind of general intelligence without kind of as a result of an unintended consequence. Really, the kind of the hallucinations or the ability for those transformer models to generate output that wasn't initially intended. Those types of things are kind of more of a bug than a feature, but we were able to kind of use it now in ways that allows us to generate text in ways that wasn't before possible, and to kind of emulate human intelligence. And with that, I think there's now a lot of possibility to apply this to pretty much almost every business use case. So that's one of the things that's currently for an AI engineer, I think, that affects us the most, is how thinking about how large language models in general can be applied to pretty much any different field. I feel like there's very few companies that haven't asked themselves in the last few years about how can we leverage large language models to improve at least at the very least, like as a productivity tool, if not like a core technology. So in that sense, the exciting part is it's really there's more need for such expertise, I would say, and there's a lot more potential to apply this to many different fields that we in the past didn't think could involve AI. That's a good part. I would say the downside of it is that it's become extremely commercialized. So as I mentioned in the past, like usually in machine learning, most tasks would involve either downloading a pre-trained model to a server or to a device or to a cluster of devices, for example. But it would involve taking some sort of a model and maybe retraining it, or coming up with a new neural network architecture from scratch even. But it essentially involved a process that involved building a machine learning model from either from scratch or retraining it. These days, there's only few companies where this makes sense. If you're working with natural language processing, in most cases, the most commercially or financially viable option is to just buy a commercial service. There's only a few handful of companies that offer competitive performance in this area, and in this way, it's really become only kind of it's becoming a business where you just take a commercial product and maybe adapt it a little bit to the business needs, as opposed to a proper engineering challenge that we had in the past with smaller models, essentially. And that's something that I personally I don't really look forward to it becoming fully commercialized. So I kind of hope that there will be an opportunity in the future to still be able to kind of build models from scratch completely, maybe for some niche topics, but maybe for even generic topics as well. But I do hope it doesn't become like commercialized and there will be like 2 services that you can buy and there's nothing that comes close. I hope that this is not the future.
Yeah, me too. I think I do still feel we're a long way away from that situation where there are still so many subtle nuances in the world and sort of contexts that exist, that the need to continue to kind of build bespoke models, I think will exist for a long time to come. But like you say, it's such a ever evolving, the speed of which it is evolving is so difficult to say how soon things will be different. But I know what you mean, and I agree. I think that would be a sad day when that does come. But no, well, look, today I think it's been a really interesting conversation and fantastic episode to hear more about your story and your experiences throughout your career to date. Really, really interesting stuff. But I like to draw to a close with every episode with the same question. If you'd be so kind as to indulge me, which is, what would you say is your one favorite piece of advice that you've received throughout your career that's sort of stuck with you that you would pass on to your fellow human?
I the advice that I'd like to share is it's highly technical, like my background, and the advice was get involved in open source, and I think that's one of the the advice that I give most often to young engineers, young machine learning or software engineers. And the reason I say that is because kind of the open source community, it includes pretty much one of the best pieces of software that we were able to come up with together. If you come up with a community that of thousands of different engineers, it's unlikely that a company with a non-open source, with a closed project, is going to come up with something as brilliant as that. And as a result of open source, we've come up with so many different technologies that we leverage today. As pretty much any decent server today runs Unix, open source again is a major, I would say, part of machine learning as well. And to get back to the original point, the way pretty much anyone can get involved in some of the major projects is by becoming an open source contributor, and that would allow you to essentially learn how the actual software engineering process works. It'll help you realize what the proper design patterns for proper software engineering are, how to write how to do test-driven development. Pretty much everything that you will learn in a brilliant big tech company, for example. Similarly, you can learn by becoming a decent open source contributor. And then finally, it will help you build a very good CV, or something that you can put on the CV. So if you're a contributor to one of the major open source projects, personally, I feel like this is the thing that helps you kind of showcase that you are technically competent. If I see a candidate that is a decent open source contributor, I can just go check out their GitHub profile, and I will immediately learn, way more than I would learn by doing a one-to-one interview session with them. And that way you can reduce the technical interview from 1 hour to maybe 10 minutes, just to double check whether it was really them contributing. But that pretty much just helps you showcase technical competence, and then really in the interview process you just need to focus on maybe the soft skills part. So yeah, I feel like you can do both yourself and also the world a favor by becoming an open source contributor. I'm not a major open source contributor by any means. I did contribute to a few projects, and I was awarded the Copilot indefinite license that if you're one of the major open source contributors or a contributor to one of the major projects, you get like an indefinite license for the GitHub Copilot.
Wow.
And I recently got that, and it was pretty cool. So
fantastic. That's a case in point, isn't it, really, to give back, and good things will happen.
I think so as well.
But no, I think that's a great point, and I think it teaches people a lot of the right concepts about collaboration as well, right? And sort of understanding other people's perspective and how they would do things, and learning from each other, which every strong team should do. I think it's a great skill to take into the world of work as well. But yeah, I totally agree with you. Just from look at it from my point of view as a recruitment consultant, often being able to just look at someone's code, you learn so much more than sitting having an hour-long conversation with somebody in terms of how they code. So it's very useful from that perspective as well, in terms of helping you progress with your career and get other jobs. So yeah, I think that's a great piece of advice, and a very fitting way to end the episode. So yeah, I guess nothing else remains but to say thank you very much for coming on and talking with us today. Really enjoyed the chat, and I wish you all the very best with your next endeavors. I'm sure there'll be another book at some point soon I'll see out there with your name on it, so I look forward to reading that. And yeah, wish you all the very best with your career from here on. I'm sure you'll continue to go from strength to strength.
Thanks so much for the invite. It was a pleasure, for sure.
Speak to you soon.
Bye-bye.